Today's guest is Justin Hansky. He's a former M&A lawyer turned legal tech innovator. Now, though, he's diving deep into his new venture, Diligence, a Melbourne-based startup transforming how lawyers approach contract review and due diligence. He's leveraging AI-powered agents and collaboration tools, which helps deal teams review contracts up to 75% faster, reduce human error, and shift from hourly billing to value-based pricing models. It all sounds too good to be true. Let's learn more about it from Justin himself. Justin, welcome to ROI from AI.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I'm sure there's a lot more that goes into diligence than what I just said in my intro, but I want to know about the inception of diligence. Were you just finding all these roadblocks in the M&A space and thought, okay, I'm going to take it upon myself to solve these problems?
Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting one. It's not necessarily a straight road to starting diligence. I actually think you did a very good job of describing what we do there. But my background was as an M&A lawyer. So the kind of lawyer that works for companies who are buying and selling businesses. And so what that typically means, if you're going to make an acquisition, is you get given access to a huge pile of documents. You need to bring together a team for a short, sharp project on a crazy deadline, people with lots of different expertise, and you got to project manage them as a third, fourth year lawyer with no experience in managing people who are much more senior than you in delivering a high quality report from your client. And so I used to sit at my desk at 2 a.m, mired in Excel spreadsheets, reading my 6th contract for the day and thinking, this is madness. There has to be a better way to do this. And I just sort of shelved that in my head. I then went to the UK. I did an MBA over there. And then I found my way into legal tech, where I worked with very large firms, helping them find good opportunities to apply tech. So people like Linklaters and Ashurst. So we'd go in, we'd speak to their lawyers, we'd find things that were pretty bad, and we'd help them build little bits of software to automate that. And so with that lens, I kept hearing from M&A lawyers that this due diligence exercise, this big document review exercise, was still a huge problem. And so when I finished up with my last company in 2022 and was looking for what was next, it was just obvious to me that there was so much pain out there and no one had really solved it yet. And we just happened to be at this huge inflection point where technology is unlocking things that weren't even possible, years ago, even 6 months ago. So it's a very cool time to build this business.
Yeah. And as I said in the intro, and as you said just there, that speed up in contract reviews, a 75% increase. How does that feature actually work from a technology standpoint?
Yeah. So one of the key tasks, if you're a relatively junior lawyer, is the key contracts that a company has will be carved up and you'll get to review, 5 or 10 of them. And what you essentially do is you read the entire contract cover to cover, and then you produce a 2-page summary of these sort of 10 or 15 key concepts that you're looking for. So, are there confidentiality obligations? When's it expiring? How much is the contract value? Stuff like that. And the 2 things that take the most time are finding the concept in the contract. It's a 100-page document. If you're looking for the expiry date, it could be anywhere in those 100 pages. And then the second thing that takes a lot of time is actually writing a decent summary of them. And so what we do is we review the entire contract, we find the concepts you're looking for, we produce a summary that our top tier lawyers have been trained to ensure is super tight for a due diligence context, because you are looking at contracts through a slightly different lens if you're about to buy a business. And so then the lawyer gets a beautiful UI where they can see where the evidence came from. We highlight the bit in the contract that was used to generate the summary. And so it's very much a trust but verify approach. So we're augmenting lawyers. And I can say I used to review a lot of contracts, and I've used our system to review contracts. And there's a couple reasons it's great. Like, apart from the significant time saving, is it's like when you're reading 100 pages, you are going to miss something. Like, we're human, we have attention issues. And so between the human review and the AI review, you together elevate the quality of the human review in a much shorter amount of time.
So there is this human and machine collaboration. So do you see that balance shifting in the future? Do you think there'll be more reliance on AI in this space, or do we still need that human component just for vetting and quality checks?
Yeah. So just in terms of where the technology is, right? It's a probabilistic technology, which means I can make the system do the same thing 10 times and get 10 slightly different results. And so what that means is a human does need to check. Every law society, which is the sort of the body that regulates its lawyers, is telling their lawyers that they can use AI and knock themselves out, but they are ultimately responsible for the content that's being delivered. And they can't rely on it without sense checking, which is why we view our job as giving lawyers superpowers rather than replacing them, which I think is something that may happen in future once the technology gets really good and people get really comfortable with it. It's going to be a long journey though. So I think for the foreseeable future, the death of the lawyer is slightly overblown.
Yeah. Well, I used to work in the M&A space and had a lot of lawyers tell me that time kills a deal. And now that there's this like 75% speed up in contract reviews, seems like time won't kill the deal. So do you have any examples or use cases from the people that you've worked with who have seen a real significant impact from diligence?
Yes, I mean there's a couple of cases that I think are interesting to talk about. So this concept that happens when you're buying a company that because it just takes so long to get through a huge amount of contracts that you say, well, there's 100 contracts there, but if I get my human lawyers to review it, the costs would be astronomical. So let's agree that these 10 are probably the most important. So we'll look at those and we'll look at 10 others. And if there are big problems in those, well, then we'll do more. Whereas what we're being used for now by our customers is they will still do that very high quality human plus AI review for that top 10 or 20. But then what they'll do is they'll run the bottom 80 through our system. They'll often charge more for this review to their clients. So our clients are getting additional revenue from using our technology. And then if anything pops up from that review, they can then go and deal with it as sort of like a bonus, right? So they're not taking liability for everything that's come out of the AI system, but they're able to actually say, well, we found 4 problems with the intellectual property provisions, and we found 6 people who you have to send this legal document to before you buy the business, or else they'll be able to walk away from the deal. And so they're able to proactively solve a bunch of issues that otherwise they're just sort of praying no one noticed by the time they're done. And so they're able to deal with a lot of things that they just weren't previously. And similarly, if you're preparing a business for sale, you've got a lot of gremlins in your contracts, right? In your document set, and you don't really know what's going on in there. And so we're being used as a bit of a pre-screen. So saying like, well, let's just run everything through the system. We'll find like the 10 things we can start to fix today. So when I invite I invite a buyer rather in to look at our business, well, there's 10 less things for them to get annoyed about because we've already fixed them and we can do the deal faster.
So there's speed, which is obviously a huge component of it, but security, trustworthiness, like there's other elements that go into this, the business to business deal. So are you seeing that it's not just the speed, but people are getting a lot of benefit from the other components of just the skimming through the contracts that is not having to be done by human operation?
Yeah, definitely. It's just you were unable to process the amount of information at a cost where it made sense. And now we're unlocking the ability for you to find out stuff that you would have found out about, 6 or 12 months down the line. And so knowledge is power. And so being able to deal with those things before you actually hand over a big check to buy a company is something super important. Yeah, you mentioned sort of like trust and security. And that's another thing that we offer is because we've built our systems to be secure. We don't train on customer data. We make sure that every customer's completely separate from each other. We're able to guarantee a level of confidentiality for law firms that they can get comfortable with, that they're just not able to from some of the publicly available vendors, even if they were suitable for contract review, which they're not for a bunch of different reasons that we can get into. But it's if you have very, very sensitive documents and you're putting it into OpenAI, like no offense, you're taking your chances with what's happening out the back end.
Yeah, no, that's a good tip. Not that I was about to do it, but I will take that on board. Well, the other thing you're challenging as well is the billable hour model and moving your clients more towards a fixed fee structure. I want to know, big question, why, how you're helping your clients make that shift, and then also how do you make that shift profitable?
Where to even start on this one? Law firms are very complicated. It's really, really hard to know how much work is going to go into something before you start it. If you're a lawyer, there are lots and lots of factors that can drive the costs higher or lower. How difficult the parties are when it comes to negotiating with each other, how big the project ends up being, and all this stuff is unknown at the start. So the solution to this was, well, I will record my time in 6-minute increments, and then I'll give you the bill at the end.
Mm.
And that's, I think, been a useful way to charge for work in the past because it's easy for the lawyers, but it actually doesn't make much sense for clients. It doesn't have much of a reference to value. And so I think what you see is there are parts of the law firm model where that will stay forever. So if you are a massive ASX listed company and you have a huge piece of litigation that is like bet the farm, then you don't care what that bill comes back at from the law firm. You're happy for them to work it till the cows come home because the fate of your company rests on it, right? There is other stuff that you get your lawyers to do that doesn't have that same level of, I guess, pressure or importance. And so in the context of buying another company, super, super important is negotiating the document where we agree to buy the company. That's got lots of really important risk allocation, very high judgment, very high value. Where we come in, due diligence, much more of a tick box exercise. It's like, what is actually going on here? Are there any problems? Can we fix them now? It's basically a big checklist exercise. And so clients don't feel that that's necessarily super valuable. And so what they basically do is they drive firms to do it for a certain price. And the benefit of that is the law firm gets to charge a lot for negotiating the documents, but they also then have to run to a cap. So in effect, there's been a sort of shift to a fixed fee model of sort happening over time, which just happens when your end client doesn't see that much value in the work that's being done. And now clients know that this technology is out there, right? Like, I can't tell you the number of law firms who've come to us who've been like, well, this client wants us to include something about AI in our pitch and how we're working differently using technology. And we'll help them craft something where they put in the document where they're looking for work, or looking to win work, to help them really explain that and drive that home, because it is changing. Clients know that things are doable more efficiently, more quickly. And so the question is, well, how do law firms actually do this profitably? And I think the answer is, in areas like ours, where you're sort of working to a fixed fee cap, if you blow over the top of that, if you overwork the matter, you've made your lawyers work deep into the night, billing hours that they're not going to get paid for. And so that could be reassigned to productive work. And so that makes diligence low margin. And so what we do is we give people the ability to deliver sometimes even less than that cap. And so they can improve their margins, which is really, really important, and avoid what are known as write-offs, which is work that you do that you don't get paid for.
Well, it really is moving so fast. And you mentioned it there. This technology is really, really evolving. And having worked in the M&A space myself, I know that lawyers and business brokers can be skeptical and traditional, which is fine. How are you helping these clients build trust in this technology when it's so new and for some a little scary?
Yeah, it's just something that happens over time. Um, Ultimately, with any product, the proof about whether or not it's helping is when you put it in people's hands and you see what they do next. And so, what we're seeing is, if you're a junior lawyer and you were going to sit down and spend 2 hours reviewing this contract, if all of a sudden 3/4 of the work's done for you to a standard where you only have to work on it for half an hour, and you're spending that time exercising really high value judgment about, well, is this quite right? Is this really important given what I know about the client context? Where they're doing that sort of very strategic thinking, they look at that and they say, I don't want to go back to doing it the other way. And so ultimately, that's the pull, I think, that makes people get comfortable with it.
I think it's a mix of data and emotion. So you've got the data there, you know that it works, but then the feeling of having your time optimized or your productivity increased, or that feeling of being able to be more creative because the admin is already done. I think that is what will get people across the line. And we've seen it across a lot of different industries, and something so process driven like law, I feel like there's the most benefit.
Yeah, 100%. And I think what's kind of interesting for our customers, and that's the most value that they're actually getting out of our product, like AI powered contract review, making that a lot faster, is generating a lot of value. But what we find is about 60% of the ROI that we are driving for our customers is from our very, very like boring, unsexy project management features. So there's a lot of peculiarities of the diligence process. It's a bit of a herding cats situation. And so you've got a data set that's constantly changing. People are adding documents to the data room, they're removing them, they're moving it around. And just trying to keep all of those things straight takes an enormous amount of time. And so by fixing those problems, understanding them deeply, and this is the lens that me and my co-founder bring as sort of legal process experts, we're able to generate a lot of value in addition to the AI stuff, which is almost the cherry on top. And I think, you know, given that so much of the underlying technology is being driven by the foundational models being produced by 3 companies out of Silicon Valley, deep understanding of the problems that your customer is facing is absolutely critical for building a product that people will want to use, is differentiated, and that they'll keep coming back to.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I want to zoom out a little bit because you've had a lot of success with Diligence and you've raised funding, you've won pitch competitions. There's a lot of founders that could be listening now that are in that pre-funding stage and they're ready to pitch. What would be your advice to someone that is in that stage if they want to emulate your success there?
Oh, it's a tough one. I think probably the best thing that you can do is get lots and lots of feedback on your
Mm,
pitch, because the reason our pitch is so tight after having done this for 2.5 years is that by this point we've done it hundreds of times. And so if I go back and I look at our first pitch deck, I'm like, wow, this is absolute garbage. And then over time, you learn how to describe your business, how to describe the problem you're solving, how to make it understandable for people. And you come up with these sort of things or these concepts that just seem to land really well. And it's just something that you have to iterate towards, because what will happen every time you pitch is you'll get different questions at the end of it. And what those questions are telling you is that you've not explained something well enough. And so using those questions to inform how you iterate on your deck, on your presentation for the next time you give it, is the only way to make it better.
yeah. Well, you've taken that initial seed funding and you've headquartered yourself in Melbourne. It is really taking off and you've seen a lot of success. Turning to the future, are you looking to expand internationally? Are you wanting to expand on the technology? Where do you see Diligence going the next couple of years or so?
Yeah. So we love Australia. It's been an incredible place for us to build our product and to get awesome customers on board who are giving us lots and lots of feedback and helping us build something that's really suitable for the market,
Mm.
and actually translates really well internationally. In legal tech, because the market in Australia is not big enough to sustain a venture scale company, ultimately you need to get out of here pretty fast. And so the 2 biggest deal markets in the world, um, London and New York. And so the quicker you get to those locations, the quicker you start to fight for those markets, and your ability to actually produce a really good outcome is much greater. So for us, we're already looking overseas. We've done a whole bunch of early sales work in the UK recently. We're doing some in the US. You sort of mentioned pitch competitions. We actually won one last night where the first prize is a trip to San Francisco to do a pitch competition out there. So we're going to go over there and we're going to meet with a lot of different law firms, a lot of investors, obviously. Um, really make the most of it. And ultimately we'll be driven by the market around which one to choose next. And yeah, it's exciting. You know, every time you speak to lawyers in those markets, your first impression is like, wow, the scale here is just completely different. The sophistication, the competition, everything is bigger, faster, more expensive, but then also the prize is much bigger. So ultimately, not sure exactly which yet. Watch this space.
Yeah, no, it's super exciting. And the AI space in general, especially in legal tech, there's a huge growth there. So pivoting away from your work in legal tech, where do you see AI in general evolving in the next 5 to 10 years?
That's such a hard question, right?
Yeah.
Like, I kind of feel like the pace of change is so rapid at the moment that every 3 to 6 months, we have to go and take our roadmap and throw it in the bin and then put a whole bunch of new stuff on the whiteboard that's now possible that wasn't before. I think probably where we're going is the ability for these models to get better at defining their own tasks and their own parameters and becoming a lot more sophisticated, because at the moment they're kind of dumb with long context windows. So if something, that's something we learned very early on, was if you try and throw, even a whole contract in, even if the model says it's got a very long context window, that it can take like the equivalent of 10 contracts worth of information. The reality is that by the time you get past like 0.1 contracts worth of information, the quality of performance starts to degrade really rapidly. And so I'm not sure if this is an inherent limitation or if this is something that needs to be solved in other ways. I know there's a lot of talk at the moment about agents. I think we're still very early on in this, but I think the ability of the models to sort of self-define tasks and come back and ask questions and get more precise and get better at that first go round, I think that's going to be a huge shift. Beyond that, I kind of think trying to predict anything's a bit of a fool's errand. Like,
Mm.
I don't know, 5 to 10 years is a lifetime. I think about like less than 5 years ago, we didn't even have ChatGPT. When we were
Yeah.
first looking at this business, it was before that moment. And so in our initial business plan, we said, hey, are we going to use AI? And we had a look at the technology at the moment, like, well, there's these classifier models out there, which is sort of the old school machine learning, if you want to think about it like that, where I'll show 100 examples of a termination clause in a contract, and then I'll show it a new contract and I'll be like, hey, I think this is a termination clause. It's like that was the state of the art 3.5 years ago, right? And so we looked at that and we said, it's expensive to train, it's not very accurate, and it doesn't actually do what the lawyer needs. So we're just going to throw that to one side and we're going to focus on the process stuff first. And eventually we'll build it. And then, the ChatGPT moment happened and the world changed. And so I think trying to look forward 5 years, like, I don't know if you believe some of the sort of the crazy stuff that's coming out, like the AI 2027, that we're going to have this mental super intelligence that takes over and destroys the world by 2028 or whatever it is. Like,
Yeah.
I think that sounds plausible, but just as plausible as we're going to run into these limits, like maybe this context window problem is just like not solvable with any kind of accuracy. And that's going to mean that we'll hit a ceiling, or I think it's just really hard.
Maybe the question should be the next 5 to 10 months, because every single person, it's a question that I ask a lot, and the answer is always fairly different. Some people approach it from a philosophical standpoint, some approach it from a more technological standpoint. But you're right, it's moving so quickly, and it's branching out and becoming more widespread that per industry it'll change in the next 5 to 10 months. So it's an exciting space. And for me, from as someone that's outside of it, being able to learn more about it from people that are on the ground, it's opened my eyes personally as a creative. But this is a business podcast and we're all about return on investment. So I'd love to finish with asking you, what's your biggest tip for a return on investment using AI?
The biggest thing that you can do to make sure you're getting return on investment is to understand what's at stake. So at a very, very simple level, a business is the revenue it makes less the costs that it has to spend in making that revenue. And so if you can move one of those two things in a meaningful way, then you're a really, really good way to creating ROI. So if you're able to use it to generate more revenue, so for example, if you want to use an AI sales outreach agent or whatever you want to call it, and you can generate an extra 20 opportunities in the top of your sales pipeline, well, that's going to translate into some extra revenue. So very simple. If the extra revenue is, greater than the amount you're going to spend implementing the AI, go for it. And similarly with cost, if you got someone who used to be able to do 20 things and now they can do 30 things, well, that efficiency is going to flow through. So like just at a very simple level, it has to be moving the needle in a pretty significant way. And ultimately it's about measuring. And something that we've had to work really, really hard on is testing accuracy. So for us to prove the ROI and to prove accuracy, it's actually taken a lot of work, which is why vendors like us, I think, end up trusted by law firms, is because we've done the work of going through hundreds of contracts and making sure that things are performing to a high level of accuracy. Because if we don't have accuracy, then people are spending forever fixing the outputs because it's not quite what they were looking for, and they don't end up saving any time. And so just because there's also the work you have to do in terms of getting the AI into the final format of whatever you're doing. And so you just have to take that into account. And I think making sure that it's actually good enough for the job you're trying to do at the moment is a really important piece in that.
Yeah, amazing. Such good advice. I love keeping it simple and looking at it from a granular standpoint. Definitely something useful. I need a business so I can actually employ all these tips, but excellent expertise. I'm so excited to see where diligence will go, especially in the next 5 to 10 years when the robots take over. But Justin, thank you so much for joining us on ROI from AI.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been great.